Good morning, Henry. Hope you had a great weekend.
Yes, thank you.
I'm very excited to talk to you about your take on well-being. But before we start on that, normally what I ask all my participants is to provide an overview of who they are, what they do, and what their area of expertise is. Can you please, for the benefit of our audience, say what is it that you do and introduce yourself, please?
Thank you. Yes. Great to be here talking to you today. So my name is Anne-Marie Gawen, and I set up my own small training business called Unlock Your Wellbeing. And the point of doing that was to deliver training that was interesting for a start, because over the years I've been to some pretty terrible training sessions. People might be experts, but they're not trainers. And so I wanted to make a difference in that way. And the subjects that I train around are well-being and mental health. And I know that when I've got a group of people in front of me, this might be the first and only training they receive in mental health or well-being. And so I want it to be as impactful and as inspiring as possible, maybe to inspire them to go on to take up roles within their organisations, or just inspire them to think, gosh, I need to attend to my own well-being here. So I want my training to have that effect. So I mainly work in the corporate world, in workplaces, delivering things like mental health first aid, which is absolutely brilliant way of introducing it as a subject by tying it up to physical first aid and calling it mental health first aid. It inspires people to think, there are these different aspects of ourselves. They're pretty much intertwined, actually, when you dig a bit deeper. So they can't be separated so much, but we give so much time and attention in health and safety and physical first aid to the physical side and not so much to the mental health side. But actually, if you look at the legislation, health and safety, the health includes mental health. And in the workplace, employers have that duty of care to make the workplace psychologically safe, mentally safe for their employees as well. But most of them haven't got a clue how to do this. And many of them say to me, well, what's this got to do with the workplace? We're in a workplace, we're not psychiatrists or whatever. What has this even got to do with the workplace? So, a lot of my work is in also supporting employers to see what they can do, where they are now, because often it's because they've had an issue recently in their workplace that they get somebody like me to talk to them, but also giving them some positive feedback that they're probably doing a lot that's good, but it may just be the odd tweak or just looking at things in a slightly different way that can make a whole lot of difference. And quite often that is around communication. Poor communication, no two ways of communicating. There's a lot of communication downwards, but very little going upwards. So, that's, and so when I say to them, well, look, maybe have a course, one of my courses, and at the end of that, you'll be so much more informed as to what you need to do next. So whether it's a mental health awareness course and they think, gosh, it'd be so easy for us to do X, Y, and Z, actually, that would make a massive difference. Quite a lot of the things I talk about don't cost any money whatsoever, but some of them might, but people are trying to make decisions in this area around mental health and well-being without actually any previous knowledge or expertise, or really just not knowing what to do for the best and being a bit too frightened to do anything because it might be the bad thing to do or the wrong thing to do. So giving them the confidence really that they can make a difference. So there are ways, there's lots of legislation, but there's also lots of evidence ways of working as well that can make them think, yes, we can make a difference and this will work and this will make things better for everybody. So but that in a nutshell is what I do.
Interesting, because what I wanted to ask you was ask you about your take on well-being from a corporate perspective because you work with corporates, right?
Yes, I
So
do. Yeah.
how do you see? So how do you see that? I mean, it's a spectrum, isn't it? You have people who
Yes.
are really up there and people who are petrified, as you said, to even
Hmm.
get started because they don't want to start and
Hmm.
seeing doing the wrong thing. So what is your experience of this from a corporate perspective?
Yes, as you say, vast differences. And one of the things that I would say is I think it is the responsibility, and it's not only me saying this. If you look at the Stevenson Farmer report, they also say this, that large organisations have got a role here to model what good practice could be. You know, maybe they've got more resources, maybe they've got more um, time, effort, just feet on the ground than small organisations to drive this forward and to say, look, and we see some fantastic organisations doing brilliant work, which other organisations can look at and think, a little light bulb moment went on there. So, those bigger organisations do, I think, have that responsibility to showcase, role model, whatever you would call it, what can be done. And but then at the same time, knowing and noticing, and absolutely every workplace is different, even within one organisation. Workplaces can be very different beasts depending on what's going on there and personalities and things like that, the management style, lots of things like that can make things very different. So recognising that it's not a one size fits all, you can't just buy this off the shelf. You have to kind of take the knowledge, take the information, take some training, get up to speed, filter it through your organisation and your way of thinking and how things are done where you are, and then come up with your bespoke answer. And that bespoke answer, it's very important that it's bespoke, because if you're an employee and you just think, oh, it's just like they've gone off and got a tick box exercise and they've come back and they've told us this is how we've got to do it, it's going to feel like that. And that's going to get people's hackles up, and it's not going to be so successful. And doing things with people as well, it doesn't have to be just the job of HR, for instance. You can have wellbeing champions, for instance, in every nook and cranny of your organisation, and have them all there, driving it from the grassroots up as well, because those tend to be more successful, actually. Things that people have come up with where we work, where we are, we can see that if we did this thing here in this space that we've got here in our organisation, this is what we could do, rather than somebody in, head office in London or wherever it might be saying this is what you must do everywhere. So giving people that flexibility locally to do the best as well, but with everybody on board and receiving an amount of training appropriate to them. Not everybody has to go and be a mental health first aider, but you can bring in different levels of training for people, and giving people some slack to think creatively about well-being where they are.
True. I mean, that actually throws two interesting pieces of conversations. One is as you rightly say, we can't have a one-size-fits-all approach, which means you need to customize it. But then you also need to have, as you rightly say, a big well-being strategy in place and give them the leeway in how it's actually executed or implemented. So that's one. The second one is there's a lot of money that's actually going in at the moment, right, for well-being initiatives and things like that. So there's no point in actually investing a lot of money when people feel that it's a tick box exercise. That's the flip side of it. So how do you see, in your experience, organizations balance these two?
I think it's seeing it as a marathon, not a sprint, for one. This is not just, let's front load loads of wellbeing training or initiatives, in the next 6 months, and then doing nothing afterwards. So I think it is, like you were saying there, it is a strategy. It is that long-term thinking. It is that, sort of getting a blank piece of paper and thinking, what do we want to be known as? For somebody who might be looking for a job in our industry, why would they come and work for us? Because actually salaries are pretty consistent across the piece. Lots of other things are the same. But there's an area where we can be a real magnet for potential employees, especially if you've got a skills shortage in your industry. We can showcase what we do to look after people's well-being. And, I've spoken to a lot of people about choices and why they've left organisations and things like that. And especially young people, they would take a pay cut even to work in a place that they felt that they were respected and that they were appreciated, actually, appreciated. They don't just turn up and go home. When they're there, they're energized and they want to be there, and it's really good for their well-being. And so thinking, what can we do to do that? And as I say, a lot of the training that I do, people at the end of it are very much more wise as to what it is that they need. Because, I could sit with somebody for 2 days and let them know all the different things about that. But it's better in a training situation where people can bounce ideas off of each other and have discussions and all of that kind of thing. In a safe training room, where it's, you're not doing any damage to anybody or to yourself, or, you can get it all wrong if necessary. It doesn't even matter. But at the end of it, people are much more informed as to what would work where they are. Actually, some real fundamentals about what they're doing wrong right now. They might think, oh, it seems a great idea to bring this into our organisation. Then thinking, what impact is that having on people? And doing things like stress. Sorry,
you're saying something around stress. Sorry, I interrupted you. Yeah.
Yeah, because stress in the workplace, we don't mind talking about stress. That's okay. We don't really like talking about mental illnesses, but stress is okay. So people will talk about stress, and they'll talk about that they are stressed, etc. And as I say, as part of the Health and Safety at Work Act, employers have the duty to measure that stress and then act on it. And seeing where the pinch points are, so you can do wonderful stress assessments. You can go onto the Health and Safety Executive. They've got lots of tools on there that you can do those stress assessments, because identifying what the stresses are and where they are, not at a micro level, not to a personal level, but maybe to a team level or something like that, and then acting on that. And that acting on that is key, because yes, you can measure it, but if you're going to measure it and it's not good, you can't just say, oh, it's not very good, is it? That's poor. Oh dear. Yeah. You have to then act on it. It's part of the legislation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I see a lot of companies doing this as an exercise to measure, and then when the data is not favorable, just tend to brush it under the carpet. That's one extreme. Absolutely. And I've also seen other organizations where they see, they actually see it like a badge of honor. Oh, my organization is very stressful. I am working in that high-powered, stressed environment. That's again. So it's again, if you really go back, fundamentally, both the ends of the spectrum, leadership has a key role to play.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And in your experience, how have leaders shaped thinking from where it was to where it is now, which is brilliant? Can you give me some examples?
Yeah, so I think the thing about leadership is that this is an area of our lives, whether it's stress or mental illness or whatever, that is a very private thing. And so to say to leaders, we want you to be really courageous here and lead by example, and sometimes lead with your stories. So there's a lot of work, for instance, at Thames Water there, that they've done an awful lot of. I personally haven't worked with them, but their leader there is completely on board with it. A lot of other organisations that I've worked with, you have to get that leadership buy-in. You have to, and they have to be seen to be doing it as well. And some organisations that I work with, it can be quite difficult if you feel as a leader you've somehow got to be on a pedestal and the know it all and all the rest of it. And we're saying, actually, we want you to be a bit vulnerable. We want you to let people know that life is not always great for you. Now, some leaders find that impossible. They would never do that. They would want to, this kind of, not always macho, but this image of themselves that they're impregnable, they're invulnerable, because maybe they feel threatened by being vulnerable, and it does take a lot of courage to do that. So thankfully, in the world of in the world of well-being and all of that, there are organisations that put on awards to showcase that good practice, so that actually now, like anything else, once you start putting awards out and praising people and all the rest of it, people get a wake-up call and think, we're not doing too well in that area. We wouldn't even know how to apply for one of those awards. And again, it is that showcasing when people do demonstrate how positive it is for them, that other people are watching and other people are listening, and other people eventually, it might take some time, will think that's the bit that we're missing and we need to do that. But for leaders and managers, if you're your manager, you don't want, as a manager, you might think, oh, well, my style of management is such that I'm inscrutable and I'm somehow superhuman almost in my role. How you want me to be vulnerable? You want me to do that? That's a big ask for people.
Concept, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and yet there's a whole load of videos you can watch they're all under the title of "This Is Me," and they're great, huge organisations that are doing this, and they're taking quite senior managers and they just do some little talking head snips. They're about 5 minutes long, they're not long at all, and they intersperse them with, this is my role, this is what I do, this was my mental illness, this was my recovery, I also like gardening, I also like this. So it's basically, what it's doing is saying, this is me 360 degrees.
Yeah.
This is not just me, this thing I bring to work, this one version of me. I am a complete person. And I know I went to do some training at one organisation, and somebody had the week before, a senior manager there, she had gone to be interviewed and recorded, etc. And she did that in the morning, and she went back to her desk, and it had brought up such a lot for her that she had to go home. She was really distressed, and she said, oh, I don't want anything to do with this. I'm going to tell them they can't have the recording and all the rest. This is awful. I feel so exposed, etc. And when she went back to work the next day, her desk was covered in flowers and notes from people saying, wow, we in the small group of people had heard the recording, and it hadn't gone out or anything because she'd not listened to it or given the okay for it, but a few people had and said, wow, you doing that has made such a difference. And that gave her the courage then to say, oh, okay, then you can use it. Because she had a complete wobble, she exposed herself and then felt a complete wobble and thought, no, I can't do that. And then went back and did, because she saw the positive response that it had just on a small group of people. And then when it did go, out there, she was absolutely inundated, because people thought, what a courageous thing for her to do. And the more that people do that, we're breaking down doors, basically, is what we're doing.
Absolutely. And the other thing I see is we are all trained to be successful.
Yes.
But the thing is, we are not trained to handle failure, because failure is seen as something which is not acceptable. No. I see success and failure as two sides of the same coin. So if you can't learn from failure, that's where well-being problems really start in the organization, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. I mean, it's interesting to hear your views, your take on this. Now, if you're to give a piece of advice or three things an organization should look for when they look at well-being, what would your three big things be? If I'm asking you to say three things.
Right. So I would say I would invite and hope that organisations could do one big piece of work, which is every employee has something called, and you can call it what you like, but it's either a wellbeing action plan, it's a personal wellbeing plan. If you don't like the word well-being, and language is very important, call it a resilience plan, a personal resilience plan, call it what you will. But every single member, every employee has that. What that does is it provides a kind of a questionnaire that you would go through in a one-to-one with your manager. And if there was anything in the world, because well-being is not only about mental illness, it could be about bereavement, it could be about a caring responsibility that you've suddenly got, it could be about financial crisis that you've suddenly got. Anything can really be impactful. And so what these plans do is give people an opportunity to say, this is going on for me right now. So please, if I'm not at my best, this is why. If there was something going on, you could say, this is what would help me. Please don't make me do any major presentations for the next couple of months because I just don't have the headspace to do all of that. Or whatever, it doesn't matter what it is. But it's a document that everybody has. You don't have it because you said, oh, I've got a mental illness. You have it because you're a human being. You have it because you're an employee, and that everybody has difficulties in their lives, whatever they are. And this is a really powerful document because it's saying to the employee, we care about you and we are putting your well-being front and centre here. And I always say to people, don't put it last on your one-to-ones. Don't say, oh, and let's the last thing we're going to do. Let's put it first. Put it front and centre. Say, right, this might affect the rest of the session today. So how are you? Really, how are you? And what can you tell me that's going on for you? What's going on for you? Is there anything that we can do? And then, right, we've sorted that out. Now let's move on to the rest, because that's going to set the agenda really and set the tone, if you like. So I'd really encourage everybody to have these wellbeing plans. So when I work with organisations, I leave them with a template of one. And from that template, the thing is for me, I want people to do this stuff. I don't just want to talk about it. So I want to leave them with a template. So it's, they don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's already done for them. They can tweak it, put their logos all over it and all the rest of it, and make it look in their corporate stuff. So I would say do that. So that gives everybody a way of communicating. You mentioned earlier about the strategy, so thinking about that, thinking about the well-being policies that people have and putting them in place, and bringing those well-being policies together, so that again, this is good for you as a business because you can attract people. You can say, if you're recruiting, these are all the things that we, the bare bones. But on top of that, for your well-being, these are the things that we do. So that you can say them really easily and quickly because you're talking about them all the time. So that's part of your wellbeing strategy. I think my third thing would be, please invest in mental health first aiders, because actually you are far more likely to use your mental health first aid skills than you are ever likely to, support somebody who might be having a heart attack or something, physically as similar as that. You're far more likely to use those skills. And if we can improve the skills and knowledge, but also the compassion quotient, if you like, of society, what a better world we'd live in. Really, basically, it's the decent and ethical thing to do, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks a lot for your time, Anne-Marie. It's been very, very, very interesting.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.